on when speaking. For those who are participating via Zoom, please state your name when making a comment or question. We want to know who to guffaw on this side of the room. So we'll now begin with the meeting with a roll call of all of our members.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the Regional Council, please unmute and indicate if you are present. Mayor Anderson?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Beck? Mayor Borowski? Mayor Bratcher? Mayor Crane?
Here.
Thank you. Jen Daniels? Mayor Eaton?
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Freeman?
Good morning.
Thank you. Mayor Friedel?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego? Supervisor Galvin? Supervisor Goodman? Chair Hartke?
Here.
Thank you. President Javier? Mayor Hermosillo? Mayor LaVault?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Governor Roe Lewis? Mayor Molina?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Morris?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne?
Present.
Thank you. President Patia?
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Pineda? Mayor Pizzillo? Mayor Pizzillo? Mayor Rodriguez?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Sarter?
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Schoaf?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Sykes?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Smith?
Here.
Thank you. And Vice Mayor Andine Keller as proxy for Mayor Stanton?
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Wires?
I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Wheatley?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Wilson?
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Woods?
Here.
Thank you. And Mayor Pizzillo, I know you're there. Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
Thank you so much. Mayor Wheatley, I was listening to your testimony yesterday on the radio on the way in today. So good to hear your voice on the radio representing cities and the county here. With that, if you'd please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, it is my understanding that at this first call, as well as all ensuing, that there was no one from the audience that has requests to speak or written comment. Is that still correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Very good. We'll skip that part. Item number 4, information items. Items 4A through 4B are for information only. Do any members of the committee have any questions or request a presentation on these or any other items? Hearing none, seeing none. Next item agenda is item number 5, approval of the consent agenda. 5A through 5G are on the consent agenda. Do any members of the committee have questions or request a presentation on any of these items? Seeing, hearing none. Prior to approval, we also have no public comment on this particular item. So we will, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mayor Wood, second by Mayor Smith. To those participating online, please take part of the voice vote by turning on your cameras, unmuting your audio. For those who cannot or do not want to turn on their cameras, staff will conduct a roll call vote. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote. May I have a voice vote of those who are in the room and those who are online? All in favor, say aye.
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 I was waiting for that last one there. All right.
There you go.
All opposed, say nay. Please leave your cameras on, staff. Please take a call of anyone participating virtually who did not turn on their camera.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And when I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Mayor Friedel?
Aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you so much. Item number 6, Arterial Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Program Policies and Procedures. This item is on the agenda for approval and will be presented by Deputy Transportation Director Patrick Stone. Patrick.
Good morning, Chair Harkey, members of Regional Council. Pleasure to be here today to present this item. First of 2 items I have this morning. The first is on the Arterial Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Program Policies and Procedures, also known colloquially as the ARRP. So talking a little bit about these programs, these are the first 2 new competitive programs developed under the Regional Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Investment Plan, or RSTIP. These programs are a little bit different than what you've heard in prior presentations, fully funded with federal funds allocated to the region. And I'll pause here and I'll note it again in my next presentation. This really was a collaborative effort. Your agency staff were integral in the development of these policies, provided outstanding feedback, and have gotten us to where we are today. General items. So the funding you see on the screen here, $25 million or $500 million over the life of the RSTIP. Those were in 2020 dollars. We are looking to do a call for projects pending successful approval of both policies today. We will go out for the call for projects on Friday. So kind of exciting programming funding in fiscal years 26, 27, and 28. And we'll have a technical review of the applications done by Mag Street Committee later on in the process. One thing to note, I will note it here, I'll note it again in my next presentation. If you do the math, and you'll see it, $25 million a year, $75 million total. All total for both calls, we're going to be looking at doing 150 million projects, roughly split about 96 million for this call, and then it'll be 50 widening. We'll ignore the call out now that we know what the actual amounts will be in the call for projects. So a hallmark of all these programs, we do have goals associated with them, what we're trying to accomplish. First and foremost in this one, really, it's improving the overall roadway safety, having well-maintained road surfaces, and then providing for the safety of all roadway users. This is just not a driver-centric program or a pedestrian-centric program. Any of that, it's looking at all roadway users, providing for the safe and efficient mobility by putting in ADA compliant features. And then finally, and this is really critical, you got to maintain that which you have. So really an emphasis on maintaining the region's infrastructure investments. So objective and eligibility. The objective is really a culmination of the goals that you heard on the prior slide. It's really just enhancing regional mobility by upgrading, current roadways, and then implementing those improvements to improve mobility. Eligibility, it's in the title. This is for the arterial grid network. So essentially all of those roadways on the 1 mile arterial grid. Also those roadways that connect freeways, highways, and other controlled access corridors, and then other key arterials. Program highlights. This is a little bit of a deviation from previous calls for projects that we've done. Traditionally, the region has emphasized construction as being where we were putting the funding. Feedback from the working group, we're now allowing all phases of project development to be part of the process. So starting all the way at pre-design and scoping through design, right away, and then ultimately into construction. Those are all eligible costs of the program. Similar to the arterial life cycle program, which you've heard about, the matching funds, 70% regional funding, and then 30% from member agencies. The conversation we had with the working group, this also came out of an update I presented to the policy committees late last year, having funding limits on these projects. We had feedback. Did that make a lot of sense? We kind of reevaluated. And for this call, we will not be capping the applications of member agencies. So we'll allow them to submit what they feel is a reasonable application.
And that was the direct outcome of the conversation we had last time with the mayors here. I think you had discussion about cap or no cap. And I think we took from that, let's not cap it. And that's what Patrick and the team have followed.
Yeah. And one thing to note, it's not on a slide. Once we do this call for projects, we'll finish up targeting June regional council for possible approval of project selection. We're going to do a debrief. So later this year, we'll get back together the working group and talk about what we thought of the call. How did it work? Did the policies meet our needs? Did the applications look the way we went? To Mr. Zerker's point, did some of the policy decisions we make actually hit what we wanted? Other considerations, these are federally funded projects, i.e. federal requirements apply involving environmental, right-of-way, Davis-Bacon when we talk about construction. There is a fee that our partners at the Arizona Department of Transportation assess to help member agencies deliver those projects. That fee is actually an eligible cost. So if member agencies want that to be covered by the program, they certainly can. Agencies may come in, even though we said all phases are eligible, they may come back and say, you know what, we're really far enough along. We want to just fund construction. The one thing is ensuring that those projects are developed to federal standards, because that would be a requirement. And then if you haven't acquired your right of way, that you have a plan to get there. And then finally, this standard with all federally funded projects, enhancements and betterments not eligible for funding. On the screen, you can see the evaluative criteria for this program, no different than what was presented at prior conversations. 60% of scoring is for quantitative measures, specifically the quality of the pavement, traffic volumes, and then safety data. And then we have 4 factors for the qualitative, 40% each. Really kind of allows member agencies to tell the stories about the project. What we're really looking at here is, does it align with the program's goals and objectives? Are there unique attributes to your project that you'd like to talk about? Another area for agencies, because we do have that regional emphasis on safety. And then finally, how have you engaged the community in the project that you're looking to deliver? Here is just really a rehash of the prior slide. What it does, it gives a more substantive view of how we will do the scoring and weighting, so you can see how each criteria is factored. And the next steps, where do we go? So policy conversations right now this month in front of Regional Council today for approval of the policies. Assuming successful approval of those, we will start the call for projects as noted Friday. We'll have those call for projects ongoing through the month of April. Applications will be due early May. I think we're targeting May 6th at this point. One thing we're going to do, as this is a new program, we will have 2 virtual workshops available for agency staff. If they have questions on applications, want to see, hey, what do you think my project would look like? We can certainly have those conversations. And then ultimately, we would move to Regional Council for possible consideration of the call in June. And then a little deeper dive. So taking that prior slide, going a little further, as I noted, call for projects this Friday, 3 years of funding. We went a minimum of 75 based on some other factors. We're able to add another 20 million or so to this call. So roughly 95, 96 million. As noted, applications due May 6th. We'll have a special meeting of the street committee May 15th to review those projects and then start the funding conversations and project rankings at TRC in late May, and then moving through June for regional council approval with award letters out to member agencies June 30th. And with that, Chair Hartke, members of the Regional Council, that concludes my presentation. Certainly happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I've got one, and I'm not sure it applies to this or not, so your answer could be quite simple to me. But with the moving of the where this money is appropriate to, not just construction, but with the precursors to that, does this at all move projects in the general plan that we've somewhat loosely agreed to, either up or back on any of those things, or is that? Or am I talking oranges when you're talking apples?
It's kumquats and pears.
Okay.
But really, what you're kind of thinking about the projects we identified in the RSTIP, and that specifically the arterial program, that was a separate conversation, separate ask done through another call for projects done, late 2019, 2020. Those projects are set. Ms. Kassler has done presentations on the arterial lifecycle program. That's the conversation on those projects in the sequencing. This is new. So these are brand new projects we know nothing about yet. We're excited to see those applications. And member agencies will really tell us the story of, hey, I want to do design in 26, right away in 27, construction in 28. That's what works for our agency. So yeah, totally different.
And Mayor Hartke, I would just add to that. It's a good question because I have also struggled to keep in my mind the difference between the arterial life cycle program and these, because they have the word arterial in them. But I think what you raise is a good point for maybe a to-do for mayors, assuming there's approval today, is just to check with your city managers to make sure they're paying attention, that there's a memo coming on Friday from MAG that's opening up this process. This is a lot of money, but it's for the next 3 years. So once this cycle is done, it's going to be 3 years to come back to this bucket. It is also Pinal County eligible. So our Pinal members, because this is federal money, not 479 tax money, our Pinal members are eligible too. So it's something for everyone to just make sure your city managers are tuned to it. I'm sure that they have been, because as Patrick said, your staffs have been involved, but it's just a good check. Don't miss this one or the next one.
And to my Pinal County folks to the right, pay no attention to what he just said.
I already put a question down.
Very good. Any additional questions in the room or online? Hearing none. We also have no speakers on this particular item as previously stated. So is there a motion to approve the Arterial Rehabilitation and Reconstruction Program policies and procedures?
So moved.
All right, we'll go the motion to Mr. Wilson, the second to Mayor Eaton. All right. To those of you who are participating in the meeting online, please take part in the voice vote. Members, please leave your cameras on until after the roll call vote. And can we have a voice vote of those in the room and those online? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, all in favor, all opposed, say nay. Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, just for confirmation, Mayor Rodriguez, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The motion passes.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Patrick. Item number 7. Oh, look who's talking. This item, arterial widening program policies and procedures. This is on the agenda for approval and will also be presented by Mr. Stone.
Thank you again, Chair Harkey, members of Regional Council. This presentation, apologies in advance, very similar to the previous one. I'll kind of go quickly through it, really highlight the differences between the two programs. It's just like the arterial rehab program. We developed these in concert, knowing that they were going to be very similar, being cognizant of staff time, that we could get these all accomplished in one go. So again, first of the two competitive programs that are federally funded, and just kudos to the team. It was a lot of fun to do this. It was my first opportunity. Really enjoyed it. I thought we got a good effort out of everyone involved. And to Mr. Zerker's point, there was phenomenal agency participation. We had 40, 50 people on each call, so it was really phenomenal. General items, this one's a little smaller than the rehab widening, 15 million a year, 300 million in RSTIP dollars. Same thing, call for projects. We're going to go out this Friday, do 3 years of funding, looking at street committee in May to review those project applications. And as noted, the call will be a little bit higher. Goals here, instead of 4, this is where we'll kind of spend a little time. 6 goals associated with the arterial widening program. Inherent in the name is that it is to widen existing, increase capacity on existing roadways by widening them. Also allows for establishing new arterial roadways. So just not widening existing, but new roadways. Promoting connectivity between high demand capacity roadways and activity centers. Really, the hallmark is that economic development component you see in here. Once again, safety is paramount to that which we do, looking at all users of the system. And really 4 and 6 kind of go together, that we're providing the connectivity to really drive economic growth. And then finally, the region's investments. We want to keep what we have working and in good repair. Objective, somewhat similar to the prior one. Again, a culmination of the goals. Really, it's again about increasing regional mobility. Here by the idea of expanding existing roadway networks to provide additional capacity, and really, again, focusing on mobility. Eligibility is the same as the arterial rehab program, all of the arterial roadway network. Program highlights, nothing new here. All 4 phases are eligible. The match will stay at 70% for this program. Well, again, no caps on applications and funding requests. Federally funded, federal requirements apply. Again, the ADOT administration fee is an eligible cost. If you are going to do construction only, make sure you're preparing in advance for that and getting your project sequenced accordingly. And then finally, enhancements and betterments are not eligible for participation. This was another outcome of conversations I had at policy committees. When we originally started this one, we had quite a bit of a differential between the quantitative and qualitative. Originally started as 75-25, got feedback maybe that wasn't right where people were expecting us to land. So we moved a little bit. We've landed on a 65% quantitative. Again, traffic volumes, reliability of the roadway, and then again, looking at crash data. And then on the qualitative side, as you noted, and I mentioned earlier, economic development is a core component of this. So you see some additional considerations in the qualitative and really adding in that economic development factor for member agencies to tell us how this project will accomplish that activity. Another refresh of the scoring matrix, just showing it expanded out with all of the various columns. And then it's going to follow the exact same process. So we're doing the policies this month, do the call for projects April, early May, and then targeting June for regional council approval of the project rankings and the funding scenario. Memo goes out. Minimum 45. I think the number is going to be right around 55-ish for this one. Applications will be due May 6th. We will make sure to highlight that for everyone. We'll go to street committee to get the projects ranked, and then TRC will consider funding scenarios, which will then take through the policy committee process in June. And with that, Chair Hartke and members of Regional Council, again, that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
I just took a bite of something. Thank you, Patrick. Do any members have questions or comments? Seeing none in the room, any online? Oh,
No. No, I have no question. Oh, I just turned my mic. Go ahead.
I had just a question in the aspect that this includes Pinell County as well.
Yes, Mayor Wilson, members of Regional Council, as Mr. Zerker noted, the nice thing with these, as these are funded with the region's federal funds, all member agencies within the region are eligible, both in Pinell and Maricopa counties.
all right. Seeing, hearing no additional questions. Again, we have received no written comments, no speaker cards for here. Is there a motion to approve the arterial widening program policies and procedures?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Mayor Smith, waiting for him to finally come in, a second by Mayor Orsborn. To those of you who are participating online, again, you know the drill. Please turn on your cameras, leave them on until after the vote. Can I have a voice vote of all those in the room and those online? All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say nay. All right, Steph?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. President Patia?
Aye.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Patrick. Next on our agenda is update on Proposition 479, Transit Lifecycle Program Implementation Activities. This is on the agenda for information and discussion and will be presented by Arminta Syed, Policy and Initiatives Program Manager. Arminta.
Good morning, members of Regional Council. Thank you for allowing me to present sitting down today. I'm here to provide an update on implementation activities related to the implementation of our Prop 479 Transit Lifecycle Program. So similar to the items presented before me, this is another element of our RSTIP, with the Transit Lifecycle Program, of course, being the management tool for the transit investments included in the RSTIP. So when it comes from moving to the Prop 400 program to the Prop 479 program, the Transit Lifecycle Program has the largest policy shifts of all the programs in the RSTIP when it comes to management of the funding. This includes considerations for both capital and operations. And in addition, with the 479 program, management of that program is moving from Valley Metro to MAG, meaning that we are establishing implementation procedures and just management procedures for the first time. So taking all of these factors into account, this is one of the more complicated implementation efforts ahead of us when it comes to all of the Prop 479 or RSTIP programs. And as a result, the intent is really to have a iterative process where we come back and present several detailed discussions in front of you all, going over all of the different components that make up the TLCP, starting with our conversation today, which is intended to serve as a high-level overview of the program as it stands today and the work that's been done to date, so you can have that as context for those future conversations. First, I'll begin by providing a brief summary of the history of regional transit funding policy, particularly under the Prop 400 era, as it was a lot of this experience that fed into developing the 479 program as it stands today. So roughly 20 years ago, when we were developing, which served as the basis for Proposition 400, the original approach for the Transit Lifecycle Program for regional transit funding was a long-range plan-based approach. And by that, I mean funding was identified for specific regional bus operations, for bus capital elements, as well as rail capital elements. Prior to Proposition 400, in particular with transit service, service varied from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, mainly because of the unevenness in local funding. And so the intent with the plan-based approach was really to fill in those gaps in order to provide that consistent service across that regional transit network. However, there were some inherent inefficiencies with this approach, namely that it was vulnerable to market risk. So as economic conditions changed over time, things like revenues, costs, demographics, it was misaligned with the original plan assumptions, and that made it really difficult or challenging to keep those original plan commitments. And this is exactly what happened when when the Great Recession hit, and it forced significant cuts because of the major declines in revenues collected. And in general, a big takeaway was that the long-range plan-based approach was much better suited to capital programs because of the longer time horizon associated with them. So as a result of that Great Recession and the cuts that had to occur, there was a shift in the funding policy to a fixed allocation-based funding approach in which there were fixed allocations distributed to jurisdictions based on the proportional investments included in the original plan. And you can see that here in orange, broken up by the ratio between the subregions. And while this provided a level of financial stability, it had some of that same shared problems because of its static nature, same shared problems as that long-range plan-based approach, in that it could not respond to changes in market demand. And you can see that here when you look at the 2019 proportion of revenue miles as well as ridership shown here in blue. And another issue with this approach was the inherent incentivization to focus on localized service instead of regional service that crossed jurisdictional boundaries, such as express service, which was the original intent of the Prop 400 plan. This focus on localized service, as previously alluded to, was even further compounded when you look at the role that local transit funding plays, because it plays such a significant role. As you can see here on the map, which shows the color of funding, the green here shows the local fixed route that is funded through local funding versus in orange, which is funded through regional funding. The reason for that is because there's a significant gap between the projected regional transit funding needs as well as the regional funding available. Even if all of the regional funding available was allocated just for transit, it still would not be enough to pay for all of the needs. And so local transit funding will always play a huge role. And so to summarize, regional transit funding policy under Prop 400, originally a plan-based approach model was implemented. Because of the Great Recession, there was then a shift to a fixed allocation-based approach. And now, as we talk about 479, taking the lessons learned from both of those approaches, the 479 program takes a whole new framework into account. So now I'll talk about that a little bit further. So knowing that there are such scarce regional resources available, policymakers intentionally focused heavily on regional transit funding policy during the development of the RSTIP. There was direction provided to explore a more flexible option that allowed a response to changes in market demand over time, as well as encourage investment that would enhance performance. And so the new 479 TLCP centers around a formula-based approach for distributing bus operation funds, and I'll go over that now in a little bit of detail. So here are the 4 different components that make up the TLCP, as well as the revenues that flow into it. There are several subcomponents that fall under each of those 4 main components, and I'll touch on each of these individually. First, talking about the Bus Operating Assistance Program, this is where that formula-based approach mentioned earlier comes into play. This is a component that's made up of 3 subcomponents. It's allocations that go to jurisdictions, and those allocations are calculated periodically in order to provide that level of flexibility in order to respond to changes in the market. While the allocations are not specifically tied to routes, the allocations are calculated based on the performance of routes and such, incentivizing investment in those well-performing routes. And that's really the formula program. And the formula program is calculated based on the 2 factors that you see here, ridership as well as revenue miles. On top of that, because it is such a shift in policy, there is a base allocation provided in order to provide that level of stability, in order to ensure that regional commitments under Prop 400 can continue to be met under the 479 program. And then the third component is the seed funding program, where there's a funding set aside for emerging markets. Then complementary to the Bus Operating Assistance Program is the Regional Services Program. That's also made up of 3 subcomponents. These function as dedicated set-asides off the top. And essentially, under the Regional Services Program, the funding for this will no longer come out of the allocations that go to jurisdictions. Rather, the funding will come out of buckets, individual buckets that will be allocated based off of a regional decision-making process, given really the regional nature of these 3 services, that being express service, ADA paratransit, as well as transit operations support. Again, ensuring that we're taking that regional focus or regional perspective into account as we look at these types of operations. In addition, there's funding set aside for bus capital, where we'll continue some of the Prop 400 era policies, such as funding 100% of bus purchases. And then the High Capacity Transit Program, where funding is identified for discrete projects, taking more of that long-range plan-based approach given the capital nature of these. So in terms of next steps, some of the elements that we're working on so that we can come back and give you future updates include development of a fiscally balanced program, incorporating our latest revenue forecasts, as well as updating the costs. Working with our partners at Valley Metro to ensure that we are identifying and updating the latest needs and assumptions associated with those costs. We are also looking at project and phasing modifications, specifically with the high capacity transit program. And then, of course, as mentioned earlier, establishing those implementation procedures and management procedures. We are working with a Prop 479 TLCP working group to help provide input into this. The working group is made up of representatives from your agencies who are helping provide that feedback so that we can help develop a fully articulated TLCP that will function efficiently for everybody. And then we'll come back and provide updates periodically on that as we work with the working group. And then just in terms of the schedule, so we're here today providing the overview. Over the next year, we'll go into deeper detail on each of those 4 components shown earlier. You can expect by June, we will likely start initiating the discussion on the bus operating assistance program. And then ultimately, after having the discussion on all of those 4 components, we'll come back in the fall, request action on approval of the updated 479 TLCP, as well as the fully established policies and procedures. And then just before I wrap up today, the fiscal 2026 is quickly approaching, and of course, it includes both the end of Prop 400 and the start of 479. Of course, there's still a lot of work ahead of us in developing the 479 implementation policies. And so as a result, last November, there was a discussion initiated in that the 400 era policies would continue through the end of fiscal 2026. And all of the policies discussed here today would not be implemented until fiscal 27 at the earliest. And so that wraps up my presentation today, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Arminta. You had that memorized, didn't you?
Yes.
I know, I look behind me like,
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Questions or comments for Arminta? Seeing none, I know this is an ongoing conversation that we'll continue to engage in. Thank you so much. And again, this was up for information and discussion. Item number 9 is the development of the MAG fiscal year 26-27 Biennial Unified Planning Work Program and Budget. This is on the agenda as well for information and discussion. Executive Director Ed Zerker will present the update.
Thank you, Mayor. Just briefly on our budgeting process. Every 2 years, MAG develops a 2-year, it's called a Unified Planning Work Program that goes along with our budget. So we're a different cycle than the cities, than our agencies where you're going every year. We do an every 2-year budget here. The benefit of that is you only have to hear this once every 2 years. The draft, it's called a UPWP, is reviewed by federal agencies and ADOT in the spring and then approved by the regional council in May. And just because of its complexities, we bring it to you in little smaller pieces. The work program development process and timeline, which is shown up here, it's governed through an agreement with ADOT, and ADOT holds primary responsibility for administering federal funds in accordance with federal and state regulations. And because of that, that's why we bring it in pieces here in February, March, April, and May. So last month we talked about the timeline and also the proposed member dues and assessments. And just to refresh, because of the sunsetting of the MR 911 system, in aggregate, dues and assessments for our member agencies have decreased. In total, there are some variations depending on the relationship to the MR 911 system, but we committed to hold our dues as close to where they were last year as possible for everyone. This month, I'll discuss the proposed compensation for staff and staffing changes for the next 2-year budget, which I've also presented to the management committee. So your city managers have heard this as well. The staffing changes that you'll see in the budget this year reflect my review of MAG's operation over the past 2 years, which has resulted in some streamlining. So just by way of a couple of examples, transportation was in 2 divisions. I've put that together into 1 division. I've absorbed the regional analytics division into more appropriate divisions within the agency. And so those opportunities allowed us to reduce a couple of management positions by consolidating and streamlining. Our economic development function, as you recall, has been eliminated with the sunsetting of the Economic Development Committee that by the Regional Council, the action the Regional Council took last year. I've reduced our office and clerical services function to better align with the workplace of today. Human Services is now part of a community initiatives team, which allowed us to streamline some management and executive positions as well. So as a result of all that, the 26-27 budget will show a reduction in staffing at MAG from 126 positions to 120. So a decrease of 6, and it reflects the reorientation of the agency and a priority direction from you as we've gone through the last couple of years. So with that in mind, I'm able to propose a 3.5% compensation increase for our staff in each of the next 2 years. Just from a quick review of the region, it looks like that's about in the middle of what most of our agencies are doing. And that helps us to retain and attract staff. So the individual employee pay increases will be based on performance, and they may vary, but the average will not exceed the 3.5% number. I'll continue to look for efficiencies in our operations and continue to review, but the main priority is to have as much resources available for projects and programs that serve you all as the member agencies as possible, while keeping our staff highly functioning to serve you. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ed. I'll just start with a comment. I've appreciated your ongoing work to look at MAG from the eyes of a new director, even though you're not that new anymore, but you've continued to look at saying, how can we be agile, nimble, effective, without also causing disruption across the region or across your staff. So I've appreciated your tack on government efficiencies and incorporation of the same.
Thanks.
Yeah. Any additional comments or questions in the room, online? All right. Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Item number 10, air quality update. This is on the agenda for information and discussion. Matt Poppett, Environmental Director, will present the update. And before Matt starts, I just want to share that I don't know if any of you attended the NLC conference in DC this year, but at the opening session, Administrator Lee Zeldin had referenced Arizona with the Yuma situation with ozone and particles, and us in our ozone, and the dilemma of trying to be held responsible to solve a problem that we didn't create. And as an aftermath of that, Senator Kelly coordinated a meeting with him coming to Arizona. He met with electeds, people from the Commerce Authority and others, and then as well as MAG and us. And I was personally pleasantly surprised by the sense that I thought for the first time that our voice and our cry was being listened to. EPA has been out here before, but it was a one-size-fit-all response and no sensitivity to the fact that we couldn't fix what we didn't cause. So it was a heartwarming change in conversations, and although I know there's still work and announcements coming forthwith, I like saying that phrase, but with that, Matt's going to present our position and what he presented there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Harkey and members of the Regional Council. Great summary of that meeting that we had. As Chairman Harkey mentioned, we were in the second hour of a 2-hour meeting last Wednesday. The first hour was Arizona Chamber of Commerce and then local air agencies. So us, ADEQ, and Maricopa County were able to present our requests to the administrator directly and to Senator Kelly, which really was an unprecedented opportunity to be able to speak directly to a cabinet level official and have him listen and hear our concerns was really a great moment for us. And Chairman Harkey did a great job teeing up our conversation. So as the chairman mentioned, we just want to go through what we presented for your benefit and then kind of summarize some of the other requests that were made by ADEQ and Maricopa County as well. So initially, we started out with describing our non-attainment area. The size of our non-attainment area is really important. We're almost the size of Connecticut. So any impact that is made to this area has a huge impact. Currently, as you all are aware, the EPA standard is 70, and we're well over that. We're at 80 parts per billion. What's MAG's role in air quality? We wanted to make it clear that we're a little bit different than the regulatory agencies. We're a planning agency. So our partners at the state and at Maricopa County and Pinal County are in charge of making the rules and enforcing those rules and control measures that are adopted in our plans. But our role is really to bring everybody together and to go through the technical work to say, this is how we're going to meet the standard. And these are the things we want to do to try and meet the standard in the future. So this graphic you have seen a lot because it tells our story so well. Over time, our region has done a fantastic job in reducing local emissions. And what's new on this graph that maybe you haven't seen before is we've added 2023 emissions to this graph as well. So this trend has continued. You can see we kind of started back in 2005 with emissions of 600,000 pounds per day of both VOCs and nitrogen dioxide. These are the two precursor chemicals that when combined with sunlight form ozone. We have reduced that almost in half by 2023. We're at 300,000 pounds per day of VOC, and nitrogen dioxides are even lower, closer to 200,000 pounds per day. So our emissions, we've done a great job at reducing man-made emissions. But as you know, in recent years, our ozone concentrations have not responded to those local emissions. So what's going on? Roughly around the year 2017, we see that ozone concentrations, which are represented in blue on this line, started to go back up again to where we were all the way down to 75 parts per billion. Now we're stuck around 80 for the last 3 or 4 years. We know that wildfires is a big part of this. If you take out wildfires, that's what we think the ozone concentrations would be in green. So we have this disconnect. We reduce emissions, but our ozone concentrations keep going up. This pattern is observed not only in our region, but across the Intermountain West. So you see our neighbors in Denver and in Salt Lake City have very much the same issues that we have. And we want to make that clear to the administrator as well. A decrease in statewide man-made emissions, but a recent increase in ozone concentrations. The other big problem that we face that Chairman Harkey mentioned in his introduction is that most of the ozone that's within our region is out of our control. Either comes from natural sources or from transported ozone, whether that be from international or from interstate sources. That's not just our estimate. Our models and both EPA models agree. So we're stuck trying to find 100% of the solution from 20% of the problem, and it hasn't been working. So we need help from EPA to deal with this. So what was our first request? The Clean Air Act has this provision called 179B that does provide relief from international emissions. If you can prove that you would have attained the ozone standard but for emissions from international sources, EPA can keep you at your current designation and not bump you up the severity ladder. So we're currently at moderate. If we can make this demonstration to EPA, they can keep us at moderate. However, EPA's current guidance effectively discourages these submissions. So here are the things that we asked of the administrator to change. No test that international emissions must be greater than domestic emissions. This isn't in the Clean Air Act. We don't think this should be in the guidance.
Take just a second and describe how that actually worked, because there was some commentary from the administrator about this didn't make common sense when he heard this.
Yeah. So I think it was a combination of our first and second points here. So the current guidance really is directed to only border areas being able to access relief. So if you live on the border, they've approved it for Imperial County, they've approved it for El Paso, where it's clear that Mexican emissions are higher than domestic emissions. What we're trying to argue is even if those domestic emissions aren't as high as our local ones, they're still preventing us from being able to attain. And so we think that should be removed away. Also, the senator had some questions on this thing where international emissions must be different on exceedance days than non-exceedance days, and that's really where that discussion came from. Again, they didn't think that made common sense. You know, no matter what the impact is on whether you exceed or not, it should be excluded. And lastly, you should be able to take into account natural emissions as well as international man-made emissions when you're seeking relief. And after we presented these points, Administrator Zeldin said done. So that was a great encouragement. So we're looking forward to seeing these changes to the guidance. There's a lot of work left to be done, but we're hopeful that we will see these changes. The other portion that we really need relief from is wildfires. Currently, it just takes too long to present the documentation to EPA that when we have a wildfire, it causes increased ozone. They're not trusting the documentation that we're submitting. It just takes too long, and often there's too many technical hurdles to get that over the line. So Administrator Zeldin also agreed this is a priority for their administration. They had already called this out even before we presented this. They're going to be changing the way they approve removing exceedance days that are attributed to wildfires. Yeah.
Picture.
Yeah. This is a great example. So on this day, this is a smoke map produced by NOAA. The red graphic is areas of heavy smoke, orange is medium smoke, and green is light smoke. So you can see under this scenario, almost the entire West was covered in smoke. But this is still a day that only has low evidence from EPA. We can't even get this day over the bar for them to be able to say, yes, we think you were impacted by smoke and your ozone was increased. So there are some common sense things that we can really do to get us over the bar.
Matt, related question. So did we see anything different, or what's the timeline for example, the LA fires and what was going on there? Do we see evidence of that spiking, what we're seeing here? That's probably the most recent transport.
Yeah, so for those LA fires, the predominant wind direction that time was blowing it out to the Pacific.
Okay,
So we weren't impacted by those LA fires.
thank you.
Yeah. Lastly, what we wanted to articulate to the administrator is we are really under a time crunch and for him to make some of these decisions. You can see that sanctions are set to take place here in May on industry. So we need a decision quickly from the administration on whether they are going to allow us to remain moderate or not, because that will determine the type of plan we can submit to EPA for approval. And again, we just wanted to highlight to the administrator that the sanctions that are scheduled to take place are really counterproductive. These are sanctions on things that would increase congestion if the highway sanctions, for example,
Decrease.
were to
Decrease. Oh, the sanctions would
the sanctions would increase. Yeah, so these are counterproductive to improving air quality. Similar with the industry offsets as well. So what's our summary? Our summary ask of the administrator. We do believe that we can submit an ozone plan to the EPA that addresses the moderate area requirements of the Clean Air Act. EPA can approve that plan if revisions are made to the international emissions guidance and if they approve our wildfire exceptional events. The county spent some time on this, but we also need the EPA to approve County Rules 204 and 205 that allows them to generate emission reduction credits that industry can use to continue their new location here in our valley and their expansion as well. So if EPA were to approve that plan, we would be able to continue our regional efforts to reduce emissions. It would terminate the counterproductive sanctions on industry and highway funds, and it would prevent reclassification, which would restrict new business and industry. So where we have shifted now as MAG, you've heard me talk about a serious area plan development. We're putting that off to the side because we're assuming we're going to stay moderate. So we're working as fast as we can to submit a moderate area plan to EPA that will include a demonstration of 179B international emissions, the impact. We've hired Ramble Americas to do that work for us. So we're going to get that up to EPA as soon as possible so that they can keep us at moderate and hopefully approve the plan. I'll just mention briefly as well that one of the points that the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality made is that we want EPA to continue their work in funding the science so we can understand ozone better. So continue funding efforts like our GLORE, ozone steady in the summer, and also be able to work with EPA scientists to understand ozone better. And then the county focused again on approval of those rules, which will really help for continued expansion of industry and allow that to occur. So that's my summary. If there's any other questions, happy to take those.
Mr. Chair.
Mayor Eaton.
Yes, thank you. Great presentation. Thank you so much for the work that you do and on this and the group. So my question is, as I come from the fire portion of the world, how close, as you're developing these programs, these plans, are you working with DFFM or the Department of Forest and Fire Management? Do you work with them as far as projections? Because we just recently received our projections for the season, and which our season starts the 14th of April. So are you working very close with that as far as the wildland part?
Thank you, Mayor Eaton. That's a great point. So our process currently is we meet with Maricopa County and the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. We kind of look backwards. So we look at the exceedances that have occurred, and we get together and we say, of those ozone exceedances, which ones were caused by wildfire? And so we, as part of that, we work with their meteorologists who do have some interaction with the Forest Service and other groups. But it's a great point. We haven't really thought about looking forward into projecting the wildfire season. So that's something we can think about doing. But in general, it's the air agencies getting together to determine, kind of backwards looking, these are the days that we think wildfires impacted us.
Mayor Osborne.
Thank you, Chair. I think that was what you started off with at the beginning of the conversation here was an excellent synopsis. It was great to see Administrator Zeldin talking about our issues out here at the League of Cities in front of the whole world. So we've completely got their attention, and it's evident in him coming out and talking with the group here. Is there ever a point where if we do prove up the international ozone or the transient ozone that's coming in, that we can go from moderate to whatever that next level down is, or are we stuck at moderate for forever?
So yeah, thank you, Mayor Osborne. So currently the way the Clean Air Act is structured is it keeps us at moderate. Now, if our air quality improves, we can submit what's known as a maintenance plan and then become what's known as a maintenance area. And we shift from a non-attainment area to a maintenance area. My understanding is there isn't currently a mechanism to get us back to marginal. However, I'm not a legal scholar. That could be possible, but I think once you're at a level, I've never seen an area be able to go backwards, but it could be possible. To my understanding, we'll be stuck at moderate if EPA approves that demonstration.
It might be good, especially since we have the ear of the EPA, to have those conversations and see if we can't improve and go back based on the fact that it's transient coming in. And if we can prove that up scientifically, then it's a much better story for us as, getting highway funding or economic development happening in, that we're not a moderate non-attainment. We're just whatever that next marginal. I think that would be very worthwhile conversation.
Great suggestion. We'll definitely check into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, one comment, two questions. So I also concur. It seems to be a new day with the EPA, and I don't think I would rely upon, we've not seen it in the past, because we've not seen this interest in re-looking at this in the past either. So two questions. First, I know that they really put a rush on you and MAG to get them information immediately. Is there any idea of when there might be an announcement in this?
Yeah, so Chairman Harkey, members of the Regional Council, we were requested to get all of our points together, both us, ADEQ, and Maricopa County, and submit that to the administration. Senator Kelly's staff has done that on our behalf. They've sent an email outlining these requests again. Theoretically, a meeting is expected to occur either later this week or next week, where they're going to go over those with EPA staff again And I think what or Administrator Zeldin had said is they were going to try and identify the things they could do quickly right away, and then also identify the things that might take a little bit more time. So I think that's what we're expecting will occur, is that we will get some things that they can say yes to right away, give us an answer on, and then maybe some things might take a little bit more time. But we're still hopeful that it will allow us to submit this moderate area plan in time and get it approved. But more to come on that.
Thank you. And I'd also heard last week, this week, that there was a substantial gutting of the EPA department and scientists. Is there the potential for us to say, hey, we realize that you're struggling, let us do the work, or here's the work, and see if the existing work or ongoing work might also help them be in our favor if they're going to struggle to maybe duplicate or prove what we're already working on? Have you heard anything concerning just the EPA abilities based upon reductions of their ability to meet this need or others across the land?
Yeah, great question again, Chairman Harkey. We've certainly have heard those projections as well, especially what's known as the Office of Research and Development, which is sort of the scientific arm of EPA, that would be significantly reduced. I think one of the avenues that the administrator has suggested to help with that is to rely more on state and tribal submissions for their scientific proof and evidence. So much more in that cooperative federalism mode. You hear a lot about that phrase. And so that there would be more deference to the technical information that we would submit as an agency, which could help move the path forward. But they haven't made we haven't seen those reductions yet. They've just been talked about. And I think we did also state that it is important. We do think we want that science to continue, because while we continue to reduce our emissions locally, there still are some unknowns in this problem that we want to know. If there are things that are reasonable that we can still do, I think everybody would like to think about those and evaluate them and see if it's something we want to do. So if we find out that if we reduce VOCs instead of nitrogen oxides, we get a bigger bang from the buck, we'd like to know that. So we still want the science to continue, but the big picture certainly is for us to get this plan up here and get it approved by EPA.
And I've come up with another question. So as part of the study we're doing with ASU, Maricopa County, and others, that will help us identify potential the VOCs or the nitrogen oxides that will go further, and also maybe weatherproof us a little further to have this study done if this administration or future administrations change course. Is that a good statement?
That's a fair statement, Chairman Harkey. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Additional comments or questions? Thank you, Matt.
I've just wrapped this up with another comment about basically the policy direction that you all have given us over the last 2 years. I think has brought us to this point. So the idea that we would get the EPA administrator in his first 2 months to come here is really unprecedented, I think. And that speaks to the fact that the mayors and the business community are speaking with one voice. So the work you do here at MAG, the work you do as members of GPEC's board, we keep hearing the same talking points that we've refined here in this room coming from our business partners. And that's been really powerful. And in fact, we see some of our slides repurposed by business groups under their own banner. And we're fine with that because, the information is what's important. But what it says is that the information being produced by Matt and his team of scientists is really critical to this effort. So thank you for that. The second piece is this whole effort of coordinating with the Intermountain West cities like Denver and Salt Lake and Las Vegas. And Matt's also taken a great lead with that on that. And he and his team of scientists at MAG here are really doing a lot of work. And so just this last week, Matt convened a group from our Intermountain West partners to talk about what you mentioned, Mayor Harkey, the ground level ozone study that we've done here and that they are either have done or are going to do in Denver and Salt Lake and other places to start sharing that information. That's something that is new. And really Matt's taking the lead and is seen as a leader in air quality planning in the Intermountain West. Again, that comes from the policy direction of this group. So I just think it's important to let you know that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Osborne.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just one last question. Is the presentation you gave today, is that available on the website or can you push that out through email to us?
Absolutely.
We
Okay,
can
thank
distribute
you.
that.
Thank you, Chair.
Great. All right. Thank you, Matt. Next up, item number 11, Executive Director's Report for information. Mr. Zucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First thing I'd say is when you go home and someone in your family says, "What did you do today?" I hope you'll tell them that you as members of the Regional Council unleashed $150 million of funds to make transportation better in the region. That's really what you did with those two items that Patrick had. Sometimes we've got meetings to do and agendas to do, and we don't stop and think. You just set in motion $150 million to improve the arterial network in this region. So kudos to you. Well done. Want to talk about a specific project, US 60. We talked a lot about that. There was a virtual public meeting this month earlier with ADOT Peoria, Surprise, our staff to bring people together to talk about this really important study. It seems like every day in the Business Journal, there's something about the BNSF and something going on. We talked with the folks from Wickenburg. They're starting to feel the pressures from the BNSF. So the 60 corridor is really critical to us. So you put in place this study, the resources for it, and our staff is out there working on that. Want to commend the group here. This is an award here to my left. Next slide, please. That was received earlier this month. Governor Hobbs and Arizona Forward awarded MAG the Governor's Award for Arizona's Future. Mayor Osborne was there with Mayor Gallego to accept the award. So that was a very nice recognition of the RSTIP, that mouthful word salad of words that defines what the Prop 479 plan really was. So again, it's really a high point for us as MAG staff to work with you all to receive that award. Finally, always have to give a shout out to our chairman and his attire. I don't know if we showed last month. I think there was a picture of him in his ruby red shoes from his State of the City, and this month it was emerald green hat for celebrating St. Patrick's Day. And we always have to commend Mayor Hartke's bravery and choices in attire. So thank you, sir.
I like to think I'm a fashion leader.
You
Thank
are, absolutely. Mayor, that's my report. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Zucker? All right. Thank you. And
Chair, this is Mayor Sartor, City of Surprise. I just wanted to say thanks to Mr. Zucker and his entire team for that US 6374 corridor study. It's going to have a huge impact for the City of Surprise and the Northwest region. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
thank you, Mayor Sartor. All right. Next up is our legislative update. This is up for information and discussion by Samantha Akalek, Government Relations Project Manager. Floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Chair Hartke, members of Regional Council. We're in the 11th week of the legislative session, which is the final official week to hear bills in the opposite chamber. Many bills related to MAG's work are moving, so we are tracking them accordingly. Notably, Senate Bill 1086, Transportation System Performance ADOT, is being heard this afternoon in the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Again, I know we've talked about this bill in previous weeks, but it is creating new performance factor definitions and weights that circumvent ADOT's current project and programming process. The process that ADOT uses aligns with federal laws, so the language in this bill would jeopardize current and future programs and federal funding. Prop 479 statute is also linked to this bill and would circumvent your ability as policymakers to select quality outcome-based projects and could jeopardize certain transit projects in the region. HCR 2035 and the companion Senate Concurrent Resolution 1004, vehicle mileage tracking tax prohibitions. Again, the Senate Concurrent Resolution has passed out of the Senate, and the House Concurrent Resolution has been heard in the Committee of the Whole. As these are identical pieces of legislation, they could flip and move out of the chambers without having to go through the opposite chamber. I would like to also note that as we speak, House Government Committee is hearing the Senate bill version of that, not the resolution, but the bill. Senate Bill 1128, Air Quality Causation State Boundaries, was heard in House Natural Resources, Energy and Water Committee yesterday and did fail on a 5-5 vote. For reference, this is the bill that requires the Department of Environmental Quality to consider specific factors related to transport of emissions from another state and effects related to solar radiation or heat when revising the state implementation plan or rules thereof. That completes my report, Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Samantha. Any questions? Seeing none, hearing none online. Thank you so much. All right, requests for item number 13, future agenda items. Are there any requests for membership for an item on a future agenda? Seeing none, hearing none online. Item number 14, comments from the committee. Are there comments or announcements from the membership? I do want to say at that same parade that picture was flashed, I did see Diane Barker in the audience. So although she's not, she is still alive and well in our community. So I heard a comment online. Who is that? Please identify yourself.
All right, I'm gonna go.
Okay. So no comments online. All right. With that, let's.
Just one.
Oh.
Mayor Harkey, that green hat really looks good on you. That's it.
I've got a companion one. We can maybe wear it together next year.
You take care, Mayor Harkey.
Is that a no?
That's a no.
Right. I guess Pizzillo, you've got to dig deeper to find Irish blood in that name. Okay.
No, not in Pizzillo. You won't find any, but that's okay.
All right. Well, with that, I'd like to call our meeting to adjournment. Our next meeting is Wednesday, April 23rd at 11:30 a.m. Today's meeting is adjourned.